Welcome to week 3. We're going to read 2 Corinthians this week, starting with 2 Corinthians chapter 1 through chapter 5, verse 10. Now, chapter 5 has a total of 21 verses, and so this means we're going to stop in the middle of a chapter today. The reason why is because I'm trying to keep our daily readings below 20 minutes. Ideally, we would read chapters 1 through 7 in one sitting. That would take us a little beyond 20 minutes. Let me show you something. In the opening verses of chapter 1, there is a concentration of the word comfort in verses 3 through 7. In fact, it occurs 10 times in these 5 verses. We serve the God of all comfort who comforts us so that we can comfort others. You get the idea, and you'll see it immediately. At the end of chapter 7, we see a cluster of this same concept. Comfort, used 7 times. I am filled with comfort. God comforts the downcast. We are comforted. Paul uses these word clusters to encapsulate the first major section of his letter, chapters 1 through 7. In these chapters, Paul spends a great deal of time talking about his preaching ministry as an apostle. I have to tell you, I love to read 2 Corinthians. And here's why. Because it is so passionate, raw, unfiltered. Paul opens himself up to them, talking honestly about his personal fears and struggles while preaching the gospel. So why exactly did Paul write 2 Corinthians? After all, he had already written them one letter. Why another one? I'm going to give you 3 reasons. 1, he's on his way. He wrote 2 Corinthians while in neighboring Macedonia, and he is going to come see them very soon. When he gets there, he plans to pick up a collection of funds from them and then carry it to Judea by heading up through Macedonia again, crossing the Aegean Sea, and making his way toward Jerusalem. Now, this request for funds wasn't a surprise to the Corinthians because Paul had mentioned it at the end of 1 Corinthians in chapter 16, and he will discuss it at length in 2 Corinthians chapters 8 and 9. Here's another reason Paul wrote 2 Corinthians. There are still problems in Corinth. Yes, apparently they have made several improvements, but there's a lot of work to be done. And number 3, preachers had infiltrated the church at Corinth and were bad-mouthing Paul. They were undermining his apostleship, and they were taking advantage of the generosity of the Corinthians, and Paul calls them out on it. Here's an example of something they were saying about Paul. They were using his failure to visit the Corinthians in a timely fashion. They used it as a club to beat Paul up with. Now, many of the Corinthians still supported Paul, and apparently they had even severely disciplined one of Paul's most outspoken critics. He talks about that, it seems, in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, beginning in verse 5. Paul wanted the Corinthians to let up on their punishment, forgive and comfort him. There's that word comfort again, because it's now time to let it go. Starting in chapter 2, around verse 12, Paul talks about his ministry as an apostle by using the illustration of a Roman triumphal procession. After a Roman general returned from a victorious battle, he was celebrated by the emperor. Prisoners of war would also be present, chained up and sometimes killed during these celebrations. I bring that up because Paul's not the triumphal general in this illustration. God is. When he says that he and his fellow preachers are being led along in God's triumphal procession, Paul's describing himself as a prisoner of sorts. He is being led by God, the triumphant general. And everywhere Paul goes and preaches the gospel, souls are saved, the gospel spreads like a fragrance, and God is victorious. The Corinthians are victorious, and Paul is thrilled about that. But as a preacher of the gospel, his life is hard. His ministry is extremely difficult. And that, by the way, is in sharp contrast to his harsh critics, or as Paul calls them, these peddlers of the gospel. In other words, he's accusing them of preaching just for money, not out of sincerity. Paul's the real deal, they're not. And his sufferings for Christ prove it, he tells them. And more than that, he's suffering not just for the Lord, but also for them, proving just how much he loves the Corinthian Christians. In chapters 3 and 4, Paul talks about how God has taken frail and imperfect human beings like himself and used them to preach the gospel. The emphasis is on glory, the glory of the gospel, and how superior it is to anything else, including the law of Moses and the Old Testament. This term, glory, is used over a dozen times across chapters 3 and 4, including when Paul talks about the eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison that awaits us. That thought continues in chapter 5, verses 1 through 10. The distress and struggles we all face in this life are well worth it. And that's because our ultimate reward is greater than anything we could possibly hope for. We have a house in heaven, an eternal body made for us by God Himself. You're in for a treat today. Please read 2 Corinthians chapter 1 through chapter 5, verse 10.